So those are some of those were the theoretical arguments, and also we have discussed one particular hypothesis. But today we will discuss the various impact of this type of allocation of resources. And remember, when we talk about the allocation of resources, don't assume the resource as money in terms of the money. It could be in terms of the time as well. It is the allocation of the time, it is the allocation of the income, expenditure, and so on. So most likely it will be the expenditure on various goods and services, but it could, the allocation of resources can include the time as well. It could be the parental time or the time allocated to allocated by any adults in the household. Okay. So, but broadly, when we say resources, we mean money. Okay. Any or expenditure, right? Okay. So the idea here is that we should not consider a particular household as a social entity, just as a family, because at the same time, besides the social entity or a family, a household is also a production unit as well. Okay? So therefore, they try to maximize their output. So if you think about the household as a production unit, as a farm, okay, not instead of being a household, just think this is an enterprise. It's a production unit. So therefore, they try to maximize their profit. They want to maximize their output. So therefore, they will have to treat different individuals differently, the way an enterprise or a farm will treat different workers differently. Okay? So in that way, I think it is quite okay to have different individuals in a particular production unit, which is a family, have a different allocation of resources. Okay? If you think it in that way, rather than just as a family or as a household. Okay. Now the problem here is that when we think about this type of allocation of resources, and if we can observe some sort of pattern in this type of allocation, then we also will observe that this initial allocation will affect the ultimate distribution. So it is not just a short-term impact. So this initial allocation of resources, okay, maybe during the childhood will have its impact in the long run as well. And also, we say that this increasing returns to scale in some individuals, which means that the lower half of the capacity curve, where if you increase the nutrition, the work capacity increases at a faster rate. Okay, so this increasing returns to scale will mean that there will be a concentration of resources. Okay, and it will also affect the ultimate distribution, because if you give a little bit more to some individuals and that individual will perform better, then the next year you may think that this person performs better than the other, so we should give him or her even more. So then that person will become even more productive, and then the difference will widen years after years. Okay, and then it will affect the long run outcome in terms of what you achieve in life, in terms of the employment, in terms of your participation in the labor market, in terms of your access to the credit market, and so on. So therefore, this increasing returns to scale will have a permanent impact, because when we see that a person enjoys increasing returns to scale, it's better to put some input, more input there, because your output will be increasing at a faster rate. That is the increasing returns to scale. So the output increases at a higher rate than the input. And also, when we look at this, the expenditure pattern of the household, then we normally look at the different types of commodities, the expenditure pattern, how much the household is spending on adult goods and how much they are spending on let's say, the goods which are normally consumed by the children, and also the goods which are normally consumed by the elderly people. So the household expenditure on adult goods will indicate the parental welfare. Okay? For example, if if you spend more money on buying TV, or maybe the children will not have the access to any program, because maybe the programs that are available are only for elderly people or for the adults, basically. Okay? So spending money on TV may not improve the welfare or utility of the children, and spending money on, let's say, on alcohol, cigarette, and so on. Okay, if you spend money on that, someone will get some utility, but it will not improve the utility or welfare of the children. Rather, it may increase the disutility if they live in a smoking, live with the smoker parents. Okay. Now, so we look at the expenditure pattern because it's difficult to know, by looking at the income, we can't say whether it is allocated efficiently or whether it is allocated equally or not. So we look at the consumption pattern. So you have got the whole list of the items the household spend money on. Now, then how do you then estimate the discrimination? Then one way of dealing with it is, if a boy decreases the adult consumption more than the girls, then this can be taken as an indicator of the higher dilution of the boys. Okay, so suppose there is a new arrival of the boy and there is a new arrival of the girl in the same household. So if the household discriminates the boys and girls, boys against the girls, then the households will adjust, will reduce their consumption of the adult goods. The parents will reduce the consumption of the adult goods so that they spend more money on boys, like buying milk, buying nappies, buying anything needed for the baby boy. But if the same household has got a newborn girl, then we see how much adjustment they make to their own consumption. Do they reduce their consumption by that much? Do they spend that much money on buying the medicine for the daughter or not? Okay, so that is one way of looking at it. Okay. So it's not the absolute expenditure. We don't compare that, okay, how much is spent on person A and how much is spent on person B. Rather, we want to see that whether the arrival of the boys and the girls can affect the consumption of the adult goods differently or not. Okay? So that will give some indication of the discrimination in a way. How much adjustment you made. Okay? Because sometimes you may think that, okay, the girls may need more expenditure on clothing, okay? But that doesn't mean that the girls are favorably treated because the dresses or clothing for the girls are more expensive. That's why they're spending more. Rather, that's why we want to see how much adjustment is made to the adult goods consumption. And discrimination against girls will imply that the arrival of the boys will reduce. Will reduce the consumption of the adult goods more than the adjustment made when there is a newborn girl in the same family. Okay? And for children, we normally look at the expenditure on goods such as the food, health, and education. So these are very crucial for the these are crucial for the children. So therefore, when we compare the allocation of resources between the adults and children, we look at the expenditure pattern on these three items basically. And then, if there are inequalities or the differences in the allocation of the resources, each may have permanent and irreversible impact or consequences. So that's important. You cannot reverse it later on. So even if the household becomes rich, later on, they cannot reverse it. So that's why the initial allocation is important here, okay? Because these differences of the inequalities can have the irreversible welfare impact on individual household members. And we also know that these children, they're exogenous because they do not contribute to the household income, they do not have the bargaining power, they do not contribute in the decision-making process, and so on. So if we think that these children are exogenous, because they do not contribute to the resources of the household, and also they are not involved in any decision-making of the household, and that's why does adding a boy relative to the girl will lead to a lower expenditure or higher expenditure. Okay? So these are the questions we need to look at when we check the empirical evidence, because unless you know your hypothesis, what you're going to test, then you cannot explain your results. Okay? So if we know that these are the things we want to test, then we collect the data accordingly, and then we test to what extent this hypothesis is correct or not. Okay? Okay. Now, before going to the empirical evidence, then then we have got this impact. The impact, we see that there could be discrimination against women, against girls, against elderly, against the sick and disabled, and so on. Okay, so can we say that there is a pattern here? So the question is this pattern of distribution or deprivation based on the earning capacity? Yes, we can always explain the last category, the sick and disabled, and also the elderly. So these two categories can be explained by this, the earning capacity. Okay? Because even if you give more money, more resources to the elderly people, their work capacity will not increase. Okay? So then it is quite okay that they will not get more based on the earning capacity after a certain age, maybe 60 plus or 65 plus. Even if you treat them well, the work capacity will not increase. So that's, and therefore their earning capacity will not increase. So that's quite understandable. If someone is elderly, we can explain that. Now here there are another type of people who are elderly as well as they are women. Okay, normally the widows. Okay? So they qualify in two categories here. So possibly they will be affected more here, but we don't know why there is a discrimination against girls, because the earning capacity for younger girls, we cannot determine their earning capacity at that stage. Okay? But still there is a discrimination there. When we look at the empirical evidence, we'll find more. Now, so the first point is, yes, it's not, it's to some extent it is earning capacity, because the elderly and the sick people, they have got low earning capacity, yes. And the widows, they depend on other household members, whereas the other household members, normally, they do not depend on the widows, okay, for their essential things. And this group receives the least nutrition and the health expenditure. So it's not just only nutrition, it is also the health expenditure. Even if you give the decision-making power to these elderly women, possibly they will give their resources to their son and daughter, because they know by themselves, they know that they don't have that much earning capacity. So it really doesn't matter whether the resources are controlled by the elderly widow or elderly women, or it is controlled by their son and daughter. Okay? It could be just because of the earning capacity. If I know that I can't, my productivity is quite low, I would rather give it to my brother or to my sister or to my children, basically. Okay? Just so that the household can earn more at the end of the day. So therefore, the earning capacity can explain this type of phenomena. But there are some discrepancies here as well. If you look at the table 8.6 in Ray, as I said, this chapter is available on the blackboard, the Ray's chapter 8. If you look at the table, there are different categories of the elderly women. Okay, in terms of the age, in terms of the composition of the household. There are some households which have got married women, elderly women. You have got some households with widow, and within the widows there are two types. In one type, the widows, they have got some resources, they control some resources, and also they live with their son. And there are some widows who is not household head, and also who doesn't live with her son. Okay, so it depends whether that elderly person, like a woman at the age of 65 or 70, whether she's married or she has got a living husband or not, and whether she lives with the son, and whether she is the household head or not. So all these factors can affect the resource allocation. Okay, and the difference would be 3 times. A married elderly person can receive, we look at the mortality rate. If you look at the mortality rate, that is table 8.6, you find that the mortality rate amongst the widow household, where the widows are not the household head, their mortality rate is 3 times higher than the mortality rate of the married elderly women.